Hi, welcome to the OKR Best Practices course. In this first video, we will cover the real purpose of the OKR methodology, the best practice goal setting flow, and the management processes that you need to think about when starting the OKR rollout in your organization. So first of all, the purpose of OKRs. It may seem unnecessary to discuss this because many of you starting with the implementation of the process have already thought about it. But just because the CEO or the chief executives of other departments have a clear idea of why you're implementing OKRs doesn't mean that this purpose is clear to everyone in the organization. So let's discuss what the purpose really is so that you can communicate it throughout your entire organization. First of all, why do we set goals in general, right? It's definitely not to know what everyone is doing in the company. We should be very clear that the goal setting process is always about focusing on the right things and really finding the right priorities that we need to drive during this quarter. It's also not about telling everyone what to do by which deadline, because this looks awfully like micromanagement, and micromanagement practices are really not sustainable. So the goal setting process is really about engaging everyone in the goal setting discussion so that you can validate the strategy of the company through the people's discussions and through the teams that are actually responsible for executing on that strategy, right? So there are different approaches to goal setting. The first one is more common in command and control environments, which is the waterfall environment, which is also known as top-down goal setting. And there is an outcome-focused goal-setting flow, which is a combined approach of top-down and bottom-up feedback, discussions, conversations, line, right? So what's the main difference? In the waterfall structure, usually the managers need to define initiatives, and initiatives need to be perfectly defined because otherwise there will be a lot of rework and demotivation. People might complete initiatives in a different way than expected. And secondly, employees sometimes are not entirely sure how their work is related to the company strategy because what they're receiving is already someone else's idea, so they're not participating in this process. Versus the outcome-focused goal-setting flow, which is what OKR methodology is based on. How do we approach this? The teams, they define the change and the impact they want to achieve in a quarter based on the company direction, which means that we start from the top with the company direction and then have the teams answer the questions that were proposed by the leadership of the company. Now, the company strategy gets validated early on through OKR discussions by the teams responsible for execution. Because whenever teams are trying to answer the questions that the leadership has asked at the very beginning, we're trying to see if we're ready for that strategy, if that strategy is even realistic. So what are the OKR benefits? We're going to be discussing a lot about OKR management processes, and we need to be clear if it's all worth it, right? So what kind of benefits, advantages does this methodology offer that other methodologies don't? First of all, we have a very clear and straightforward goal setting process that is very easy to follow. And that facilitates the company-wide alignment. Alignment is one of the main reasons why so many companies are implementing OKRs in the first place. The OKRs also facilitate better internal communication. And interestingly enough, many companies, they would blame some of their failures on many different things, like changes in whatever situations. But mainly the reason why things are not working out, everything is usually coming down to bad internal communication. So OKRs really help to fix this part in your company. Now, the next benefit, which is probably the biggest one, is that everyone participates in validating the strategy, improving the quality of execution. So it's not just about telling people what to do, but actually getting them to engage in this discussion. And that means better engagement, motivation, less burnout in your company. But that is already cultural concept. So let's stick to the practical ones. And obviously, another reason that many leaders name when deciding to go for OKRs in the first place is that they want to find better strategies how to prioritize, right? So to find that 20% of effort that brings 80% of results. Overall, none of the existing goal setting structures, templates, flows offer this much flexibility and this much benefit, even from the first quarters of implementation. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. So let's discuss what the best practice goal setting flow looks like. It's a step-by-step flow, and we're going to discuss what each step really means. First of all, once again, OKR is based on the outcome-focused goal setting flow. OKR as a method doesn't work any other way. So when you're hearing things like, let's cascade our OKRs, or let's assign everything to everyone, or let's link everything to everything in our company, that means there are some certain issues in how the flow of setting goals is structured. So this is why we're doing this, so that you know exactly how you need to go about the discussion process. At the very top of our company, we usually start by defining the answers to this question. What do we want to impact? The answers to this question usually come out somewhere along the lines of these concepts here, these categories: customer behavior, internal workflows, finance results, employee growth. These concepts or pillars, strategic pillars, might be familiar to those of you who are using the balanced scorecard, which is basically those big strategic directions that your main objectives might be related to. So at the very top of the company, we normally define what is the area that we're going to take care of. Now, when we are trying to specify what exactly needs to change, what exactly we want to impact, it comes out in a form of a strategy, strategic objective, or just a numeric target, like a growth target that we need to impact. For example, increase our revenue by 10%, or increase our customer lifetime value by a certain percent. So either it's a growth target, either it's a target that we need to improve because we have been falling behind, or it is a strategic direction that we want to go after. Now, what happens next? Next is the first step of the actual OKR process in your company. The first step is to discuss the overarching objective for our teams in the organization. The overarching objective answers to the questions: how are we going to impact whatever we decided on here? And this should be a problem statement that several teams will be solving together. It also helps if you phrase this overarching objective at first, at least in the form of questions. So instead of, again, telling people what to do, ask questions. How do we solve this problem? We identified that we are underperforming in this area. How do we address this? Now, when teams have enough input from here, they can develop their team OKRs. Each team will have their own OKR to drive the company objective or the department objective or any overarching objective forward. Now, you will notice that on the company level, it only says overarching objective. It doesn't say OKR, because the best practice alignment process also says that at the company level, it is really enough to specify the direction and get the teams to engage in the conversation, in a discussion, how we're going to measure success, how we're going to drive this forward. So when we're writing team OKRs, we're really discussing what can we change and improve in a quarter. When this is clear, so when the outcomes are well defined, we can discuss what are we going to do to drive that change. And that is the question that you ask when writing and deciding on team initiatives. Each team will have initiatives that will drive their OKR forward. Personal plans are the things or the to-dos, activities, deliverables that each person is responsible for. And they're answering to the question, who does what and by when? Obviously, each team has a group of people working together towards the same outcomes, but they will be doing different things towards these outcomes. How does it work in a more simplistic manner? So we have KPIs to monitor health metrics and set performance expectations. We have company objectives and team OKRs to determine what needs to change and improve to achieve better results. And then we have initiatives and weekly check-ins or weekly planning process to focus on the right things and get them done. So you have three major components of this process, and you can't really be successful in your goal setting flow without having all of them, right? So one thing that I wanted to mention still is about the concept of not having measurable OKRs at the company level, because that is very often you actually won't hear it or won't read about it in most places, right? Because it's a bit different, because OKR as a structure consists of objective and key results. So how does it really work at the company level? When we have an overarching objective, what we define is the questions to the teams, the strategic priority, the directional statement, and then the team OKRs as a structure, as a whole, become key results to this objective. So it's not really that this objective doesn't have OKRs. It's just that the progress of this objective is driven by the team OKRs. And if you're using Weekdone already, it will look like this. So you have an overarching objective, like a company objective, improve brand awareness in European countries. And then you will have different teams working on their separate issues to achieve this objective, and their progress all together will be driving the progress of the company objective. This is the alignment best practice for a reason, and you can follow other practices, but this will save you a lot of time and a lot of trouble when trying to figure things out. So what are the wins of this structure? First of all, what we started with today, we said that OKRs offer you a very straightforward goal setting flow. And this structure is in support of that statement. It is very transparent and straightforward to everyone who is involved. It shows also a clear connection between company goals and personal level contributions, because if you notice, everything is connected together. So every lower level is driving the higher level forward, either in the form of contributing effort or actually driving the higher level forward. Only 2 layers of goals and no management overhead for the progress tracking process. So if you have goals or OKRs on 5 different levels, it becomes really hard to understand what is driving what, how is everything connected, and where to begin. Where to begin is the biggest issue of them all, right? Clear ownership of outcomes at every level, because people are responsible for tasks or plans. Teams are also responsible for initiatives to drive their OKRs forward, to impact the company objective, to achieve the strategic objective, or to impact the KPI target that we want to drive. Obviously, even the best practice alignment process doesn't come without challenges. So what are the possible challenges? First of all, this flow may not represent the company org chart directly. So if you look here, if you have divisions, departments, subdivisions, subdepartments, sub-teams, yes, this will not be exact replica of your org chart, but we still recommend to keep it simple, to keep it just within the 2 levels. This may not work in companies with transparency issues, because at every step you really need to communicate what is important and why. And if you're not ready to do that, well, the whole process will crumble. Process also will not follow itself. Everyone needs to be on board. So whenever you are discussing OKRs, it's very, very important that you discuss what each level is for, how you're going to go about it, what is the meaning of this all, and get everyone to agree that they believe this will work. One thing that you will also notice from the company-wide alignment best practices is that there are no individual or personal OKRs. That is because individuals should be responsible for deliverables, executional items, so doing things. And then the teams are trying to achieve the outcomes that they defined as the most important ones for the quarter. So people are doing things, why? To achieve what the team wants to achieve, right? So that is why no personal OKRs, they are the unnecessary extra level, and they're a management nightmare, and they're not going to work. They didn't work for Google. They didn't work for Spotify. They didn't work for Weekdone. We tried them. We figured it out, and we realized that it really, really doesn't work no matter how hard you try. So really, just don't worry about that. Figure out your company-wide direction and figure out how different teams are going to drive that direction forward. Now, a few things about the management processes, because that structure, if it's clear, it seems pretty straightforward, but there are certain things that managers need to think through to make sure everyone knows what needs to happen and when. So let's look at the quarterly workflow of the OKR process. 1 or 2 weeks before the quarter, we would set the company O's and team OKRs to understand what we really, really want to achieve. 2 weeks is usually enough. I mean, if you're doing it for the first time, maybe longer, but 2 weeks is usually enough. Then at the beginning of the quarter, so the first month of the quarter, you start executing, which means that the teams need to define initiatives to drive their team OKRs and figure out on which day of the week, what time they're going to be meeting up for their OKR check-ins. And you should be having the weekly team OKR check-ins throughout the whole quarter. You can have them weekly, bi-weekly, but it's important that you have them regularly. And these are internal check-ins, right? So the team that is working on the same OKR should be checking in every week to see how we're doing. Are we doing enough? What are we learning from the process? Now, we also recommend monthly reviews to do them cross-functionally. So if the weekly team OKR check-ins are just for the team internally, the monthly reviews are cross-functional. So just to check in with different teams on what their priorities are, how they're doing, and to understand where we are as a company. At the end of the quarter, you should do a quarterly OKR retrospective. We will suggest the template to do that. It takes different companies some time to figure out what works for them and what format to use. But mostly, if you use that template, it's going to be it's going to be very, very helpful to you. Also, sometimes when you're just starting out with OKRs in general, it really helps to start here. So you do the OKR retrospective, but not OKR retrospective because you didn't have any OKRs before, but just a general retrospective, and use that template. It will really help you to prepare for writing of the OKRs. I'll show you the template in a bit. First, let's talk about the weekly team OKR check-ins. We will discuss both step 1 and step 2 in the next video. So in this one, let's just focus on the management processes. So weekly team OKR check-ins, what do we discuss? This is usually a meeting that maybe the first one will last 30 minutes, but every next one will be shorter and shorter. So you will reach the point when you only need 10 or 15 minutes to check in with each other on the topic of what's being going on, what's been happening. You will be working with Weekdone to report on the plans and the progress of the week. So what you need to use this meeting time for is to figure out what did we learn and what do we need to do next. So what is our current OKR status? What do we achieve complete? If it's not reported in Weekdone, well, it's going to take some time to have this meeting. So really do make sure that you leverage the functionality that supports your meeting being very much more productive, right? So if you're reporting things in Weekdone, there is no need to go over every single small task that you've done. Everyone can just read it in Weekdone, so you can really focus on things that really matter. What did we learn from last week, and set new priority plans for next week? Monthly cross-team reviews these reviews are more for touching base, for syncing, for staying aligned with other teams. So it's very much about what should we stop doing, start doing, continue doing. Like taking a step back every once in a while really helps to evaluate if we're moving in the right direction. Now, as promised, the company-wide retrospective template looks like this. It has several questions to answer. I'd recommend for every individual in the team to answer these questions separately, individually, as a preparation exercise for the retrospective, and then have the team manager do the board as a summary from everyone's opinions. The questions are: which problems did we focus on? What did we learn? What went well? What would we do differently? And which open questions do we have? You will also have these blocks here to rate on a scale from 1 to 5 how satisfied you are with the impact your effort produced, saying thank you. So this is the feedback and recognition part of the process. And if you have any specific graphs, screenshots, and miscellaneous comments, or maybe future initiatives you'd like to share, you can also use this field to share more information. Technically, out of all of this, the most useful fields, or rather the outcome of this session, would be the answers to this question: what would we do differently, and which open questions do we have? Because this question will help you write better OKRs for next quarter, but this question will help you, well, not to do the same mistakes and not to follow the wrong direction. The point here is that you can't really answer these two questions if you haven't done the thinking here. So this template has been working well for many of our customers. So you should use it. We will include it in our Learning Center in the section with templates, useful templates, books, and resources. Feel free to use it and give us feedback if you find it useful or not useful. Now, some final thoughts before we move on to discussing how to write good objectives and key results. First of all, as you've noticed, the OKRs are very much about what needs to change. Why is that? Because business as usual tasks are not going to drive the business forward. If you just continue doing what you've been doing the whole time, it's really not going to change anything for the better. So the question should always be, what can we do better? What can we change? OKR is a process. It's not a one-time thing, so you really need to learn how to do it and continuously improve. But what makes this process work? Those are discussions internally on cross-functionally. So there is a lot of talking that you will do in the first OKR quarter, but as you move forward, you will be doing less of talking and really more of achieving things. But the point is that alignment is communication. You can just say alignment equals communication. Following a unified goal setting process just makes it clear for everyone, so people are not just going off in their different directions. And regular ongoing weekly check-ins really help you to stay on track. So these three components are very important to make OKR a success story in your company. Since OKR is a learning process, it might take you up to 4 quarters, even more in some cases in bigger companies, to figure out what works and what doesn't in the OKR process. So the first step would be to get the leadership commitment, define the rollout plan, and share the purpose of OKRs. You can use this video for that specific matter. In the first quarter, the most important things would be to discuss what your OKRs should be, how to align them. Just don't get stuck at this point and proceed to execution and try to see if you can work with the OKRs that you've defined. The next quarter, the second quarter, working with OKRs, really discuss the challenges in the process, polish your workflows, and make adjustments to what you've done here. In the next quarter, the third OKR quarter, try to once again reflect on what is and isn't working, not just in your business in general, but in the OKR process as well. And develop new OKRs based on what you've learned. So always base your new OKR quarter on what you've learned previously. And now in the fourth quarter, the teams will really start becoming masters of this whole process, and you will be able to replicate the exact same structure every quarter without having to discuss or explain anything at all. But keep in mind that it will take some time. Some teams will be making great progress already in the first quarter, but for most, it takes at least 2 and on average 4 quarters to really become good at it. Now, in the next video, we will cover how to write good OKRs. So I would encourage you to take a small break, to have a coffee, and then proceed to learning how to write good team OKRs and align them across the organization.